Hi, and thanks for letting me be part of this festival by Lilac. It's a great honor. I'm coming to you from southern Minnesota in the United States, on land that was taken by a fraudulent treaty from the Dakota people of the Aseti-Sakowin. It's important for me to acknowledge that my home is on stolen land, and to reflect on how little I knew about the people who were here long before my ancestors left Europe and who are still here. I grew up with the Little House on the Prairie books and with the romance of the frontier. I inherited basically a colonialist mindset that I'm still unlearning. In 1872, this creepy painting was created that shows this giant white woman striding across the nation in a diaphanous toga, evoking the classical world, leading civilization westward. She strings telegraph lines as she goes, and the land brightens around her as native people and the wildlife are pushed off into the darkness at the western edge of the land. This was a popular work commissioned for publishers of a series of travel guides for people who wanted to settle the vast and supposedly empty West, inviting them to be part of a brave new world, free of Indians and bears and bison. This colonialist mindset, this idea of American progress, to a large extent shaped the early internet, which was marked by an optimistic but blinkered belief that a new, enlightened, free society of rugged individuals was going to be independent of the old rules in the old world, dedicated to the freedom to do and be whatever they wanted. It would be a fertile ground for innovation, entrepreneurship, and progress. You see this in the 1990s with the way that people talked about the internet, a new world free of prejudice where all would be free to express themselves. And it would just, out of enlightened self-interest, we would somehow learn to work together in harmony, and this new governance would emerge. This pretty much persisted with the formation of the giant corporations that dominate the landscape today, so that Facebook can say their goal is to give people the power to share and make the world more open and connected, as if that's a very easy task. As Adrienne LaFrance put it in an article she published last year in The Atlantic, this seemingly benign civilizing mission of Facebook is really not that. It's imperialistic, and I think that's exactly right. This is not the internet we thought we had, but it is in fact the internet that we had that actually led to what we have today, one that carelessly assumes people will magically get along, even as the platforms act as mass persuasion machines, leading to an internet that is monopolized, polarized, and commercialized. Trying to understand this digital infrastructure as it's evolved and teach students how to think about it has been my work as a librarian. Currently, I am affiliated with Project Information Literacy, a nonprofit research institute directed by Dr. Allison Head, who's designed and shepherded a dozen large-scale research projects involving over 22,000 students at 92 different institutions across the U.S., exploring students' experiences with information, how they use it for school, how they use it in their daily lives, how they read the news, and what they take with them into the workplace after they graduate. I joined the team in 2019, just in time to work on a study called Information Literacy in the Age of Algorithms. And now I'm a contributing editor for a new series of essays that encourages discussion about challenges facing educators in an era when our information environment is so very unstable. Previously, I was a librarian for over 30 years at a liberal arts college in southern Minnesota, teaching undergraduate students about how to find and use and create, how to understand information. And that entailed folding the evolution of the internet into my scope of practice as it developed. So to some extent, claims for media and information literacy, as I look back, I see were often bolstered by claims that were about the anxieties around new technologies. So when I started, it was in the 1980s, and everyone was talking about the information age and how that was going to change everything, and we'd better be prepared. So here is a quote from an influential book. "None can escape the ongoing effects of the information society on their lives, on their ability to survive." It was couched in these really disaster scenario terms. And then in the 90s, the web came along, and that threw us for another loop. There was a fear about the loss of gatekeepers. What would happen if anyone could publish anything online? Faculty suddenly wanted librarians to help students become more critically skeptical of what they found online. And we often would use fake sites to school them in skepticism. And this is one that was actually created just down the road at a state university and became quite famous. It presented ludicrous examples of what might exist in a town in southern Minnesota. And it was sort of playful and bizarre, but some people actually took it seriously. And the New York Times picked up on it, saying, "Where skepticism is required as a navigational aid." And then, of course, recently it's been the fake news crisis that got us excited about trying to understand how to help students check facts and recognize when information was false. And yet, this is all part of information literacy in this grand scheme of things, where what we want is something quite complex. We want students to integrate a whole host of beliefs and practices and dispositions to be able to really understand how information works in a systemic way. We want students to understand how these systems work, be able to interpret messages critically, care about discovery, feel like they want to discover new things, and feel part of a collective effort to address big questions that matter. We hope they will enjoy the process of research and develop in themselves information agency, a sense of self as someone empowered to have the right to create new knowledge, to question authority, to make up their own minds. But in practice, it doesn't usually work out quite that way. In classrooms, students are often treated as naive information consumers. In the K-12 system, in media literacy instruction, often learners are positioned as audiences learning how to review media objects as savvy consumers, rejecting those that prove to be faulty. And in higher education, students are often taught how to sort through resources that are created by other people, authorities out there, things that have been placed in a walled garden for them in order to satisfy their professors' expectations and avoid materials that aren't safe. Google and Amazon made it appear that research should be convenient, easy, and fast. And libraries began to emulate that as much as they could, even though it isn't any of those things. So you can go to a library website now and look up a subject like neoliberalism and instantly get 131,976 results. What awesome consumer choice we are offering our students. That doesn't really help them, though, understand these concepts and understand the networks of information around them. So, no wonder students come up with shortcuts to try to cut through some of the overload. Over the years, PIL has found that students have trouble getting started. They're often thrown into subjects they know very little about, and it takes a long time to orient themselves. They adopt a strategy and stick to it. They're always looking for safe sources. They follow the news avidly, but they don't trust it. They don't think college prepares them to ask questions of their own. This is a question asked of people who had graduated, and they didn't think this was something they learned in school, which is very discouraging to me. This, to me, is such an essential part of education, but they felt they were not learning that in school. And when talking about algorithms, they told us they felt both indignant, they were really angry that their privacy was being invaded the way it was, and resignation. They didn't think there was anything that they could do about it. They also felt that they were in a different place, that school was not teaching them anything very valuable about the information they used every day. One student said, my instructors usually encourage us to use the databases provided by the school. That takes care of it. Then you don't have to run the risk of running into anything false. Another student said they talk a lot in school about .org and .edu, which is really useless advice, and it was useless 20 years ago when people first started saying that. I was surprised they're still hearing it. And then another student said, it's a 2-day thing about this is how you make sure your sources are credible. Well, I heard that in high school, and that's just outdated. They also expressed a sense that they didn't expect to learn about the way information works today in school because their professors thought about it differently. And as one student put it, it's different between students and professors because they come from a pre-social media age. They're used to being able to trust a kind of different resources that they'd always gone to, whereas we grew up with untrustworthy sources, like the one about the Minnesota River having whales and secret cities in it. And it's drilled into us that you need to do the research because it can't be trusted. So we're hearing from students that they don't feel that school has done a whole lot to help them navigate the world the way the information world the way it is today, and they don't expect it to. And yet people, when something comes up like QAnon becomes very popular, you hear people say, we need more media literacy. We need more critical thinking. That should solve it. And here was a person tweeting, with some luck, tomorrow's kids will be taught these skills in school because of the current disasters. Like we haven't been teaching these things for decades. So, the thing is, we've been teaching skepticism. We've been teaching students to do the research. That's exactly what QAnons do. They understand these systems very well. They critically examine media messages. They feel passion for discovery. They feel part of a collective effort to address big questions that matter. They're in this life and death struggle between good and evil. They basically are doing the things that we wish our students did, but often don't. So something went wrong here. Here's a meme that circulated among QAnoners. You know, they really want you to research for yourself, use logic, think critically, trust yourself, and yet they're operating in this kind of alternate trust network where the things that they actually put their faith in are outside the traditional ways of establishing authority. They don't trust the news. They don't trust science. They don't trust education. They don't trust any of these social institutions. But they want to believe in themselves the ability to create something of their own completely differently. And every time you trust the plan as you do the research, you will find there's this inexhaustible well of evidence available online for any theory you might have. So, given this disjunction here, where does that leave us? If doubling down on our literacy efforts isn't the answer, then what is? Sometimes I honestly feel despair about this. If we can't agree on how to determine what is true, if we can't overcome our profound epistemological differences, if we persist in having a large percentage of the population believing fiercely in things that are demonstrably false, I worry we will never find a way to come to some common understanding. But I think there are things that we could do to make media and information literacy a richer learning experience and perhaps help head off some of this way of assuming everything is false. Anything is possible. Nothing is true. I'll do the research myself. So what could we do? I think it's really important to dial down the skepticism and to recognize the importance of learning how to trust. Not just what to trust, but why we should trust, by exploring the underlying values of knowledge systems, institutions, and practices. What is it that a journalist does when they do good news gathering? What is it that a scientist does or that a scholar does? Examine, as we do that, how these information systems have values, and then also how they work on society. What's going on out there once these things go out into the world, and how do these things interact? This may be challenging because it's outside of our usual comfort level, but like Mr. Rogers said, we can look for the helpers. There's some wonderful research going on in this area and a lot of resources being created that educators can use. I think the library could host some very useful conversations involving the local experts to talk about how we can learn from one another and resituate our teaching so that it encompasses this much more complex, wider world of information. Peer-to-peer learning, I think, is really powerful. As we talk to students about their experiences with algorithms, some of the students were very savvy about protecting their privacy, and they talked about the tools they used, and other students would say, wait, what's that? What's that VPN? Wait, spell that. I'm going to write that down. So they were really very actively learning from one another just in that short conversation. I think they also feel they expressed concern about their grandparents and about their younger siblings. They felt like they were okay because college students are always confident, but they were concerned about other generations and their understanding of these things. And so I think there's room there for them to become teachers of the community and to go out and to reach other audiences with what they know and what they're learning as we do more to unpack the epistemological roots of our knowledge systems. Encourage information agency in students rather than the shopping cart that we often present them with 5 sources from peer-reviewed journals. Encourage them to think of themselves as knowers, as learners, as people with the power to influence the world of knowledge, but also instill in them a sense of responsibility so that they aren't that they have their own value system in place as they do this work. And then frame learning about information systems as education for democracy. Because of our polarized political realm right now, it's very easy to fall into well, we can't talk about this because it's political, or if we talk about this, we should add that because somebody will be offended. But if we think about things that really matter to democracy and leave out the connections to political parties and political systems and really try to focus on what does it mean to have a democracy and what does knowledge and information contribute to that, and how can we act in a way that the knowledge we create is supporting democracy, I think that would be helpful and useful and engaging for students. So the question is, can we actually do this? We're asking a lot already of ourselves. How do we change what we're doing or add in these new things to really dig deeper into epistemologies? I think if we want to advocate for something better, we have a working model that offers some hope. Libraries are formed around the idea of community, communities that are not created out of shared identities or grievances. They're for everyone who's part of a diverse group of individuals who come together to ask different questions, to pursue a variety of goals, but all sharing this space where their questions are welcome and where membership isn't defined by their identity or hostility to other communities. Libraries are, in a sense, self-governing spaces that are nurtured by library workers, but the people in the community largely shape what the library offers. They're civic spaces. They're built and maintained as commons, as a common ground. The broader community of librarians, like all of us here with the Lilac Festival, are working together to build and maintain this vision of community that has endured for a long, long time. It's an always evolving and yet deceptively traditional practice. It's a model of social infrastructure that offers an alternative to what we see with Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. We offer hope that a social information system designed for the common good, not commerce, is possible. Thank you.